conflict or pain are often indicators that change is necessary.
So when you get that, when you get the conflict and pain, and usually I find it's prolonged by the time we listen.
Absolutely.
Because we are stubborn.
So prolonged pain, in fact, is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know, regular, I was driving. I was driving and then I got a flat tire and then I got pulled over by the cops. That's not, that's not the thing. That's not the indicator of change.
Don't change your career.
Life. Don't change your career because you got pulled over by a cop. Change your career because even though you're making inroads in this thing, it's not bringing you satisfaction. And some of those indicators go into the home. We talked about career, so it spills over into your relationships now. And so this blissful relationship that you had, tra-la-la, with flowers and
confetti,
and stuff every day, and you'd wake up and he'd be or she'd be smiling over you with freshly made coffee.
A Colgate smile.
Yes. Oh my darling, this is what I'd like to get for you. When that, what was that Karen White song? I'm not your supermodel, and what's that line? You're complaining about the juice. You say the juice is sour and it used to be so sweet, and I can't help but to think that you're talking about me. If the juice is sour for long, it's time to revise that relationship. Okay. It's time to revise that relationship because sour juice is going to mess your stomach. It's going to mess you up, and you have to decide, you know what, we need to change. Yeah. And it's important to begin to talk about it. This is the problem because we want to, I've seen it,
We're a paintbrush
posturing
generation.
So I look at some of my parents' friends and say, no, you guys weren't okay. I realize now you weren't okay, but I wish you had told me. Yeah. I wish you had told me because I might not have made the same mistakes that you made. And I feel that that's the conversation that we need to start to have with our generation, certainly with my generation, who are divorced at a higher rate, higher suicide, higher stress, higher rehab, higher everything than the previous generation. Yet we are blessed with so much more.
We have a lot more to work from.
And so to me, I say, wow, that's what a contradiction, what irony, what irony. So I feel that, again, the pain, when you start to feel pain more than necessary, I mean, you say, okay, everybody has their threshold of pain. Yeah. But when you go beyond your threshold of pain, then you have to engage differently. Yeah, okay. People are getting into it for the wrong reason in the first place. And so they get frustrated because the wrong reasons get there. And you say, okay, so, and suddenly they discover, I did the wrong thing. Yeah. Okay, stick it out. But he's hitting me every day. Yeah. Just be strong. Yeah. And sometimes, I've seen people end up almost dead. There's a lady I know who was, the thing that drove her to the divorce was alcoholic husband beat her and cracked her skull and left her in a coma for 2 weeks. Wow. And when she woke up, she didn't even remember her name. It has a good ending though. So they'd been married 7 years. She said, I am so done with you, fool. And she left. And 6, maybe 7 years later, he walked, several years later, he knocks at her door, found out where she lives, and he was completely broke, busted, and disgusted, with nowhere to go on a rainy night. Wow. He walks back in the life and says, I have nowhere to go. And she showed mercy and said, okay, just one night. You're going to stay here one night. Tomorrow, you'll be gone. Yeah. And the next day, he had nowhere to go, so he couldn't be gone. And he turned his life around. By some incredible miracle, they went for some crusade, turned his life around. He's now a bishop.
Wow.
And I met them, they'd been divorced 7 years, remarried, and then when I met them, they'd been married for 7 years. Wow. So this is 21 years of a movie. Yeah. Not every story is has such a happy ending. How many dead girls have we had just this year alone? That's true. And so I feel that we have to be more careful, especially in the area of relationships, and say, let's ask this question even better. What is going to help us prevent this? Because marriage is a serious thing, you know, and that is not to then now say, because I've had to revise how I look at divorce. I'm having more and more people who are divorced come to me and say, man, I made a stupid mistake, and that was 6 years ago. I want to remarry. And I'm having to scratch my head and say, well, this is what the Bible says. This is what traditional teaching has. I have to think about these realities and then say, how do we get them there?
Because sometimes it's not even that obvious, like sometimes there's no infidelity, or there is infidelity, but then you're not being beaten up or something like that. But there's
nothing there.
There is the consistent pain and conflict that you're talking about.
Or even just lack of empathy. I talk about lack of empathy. You know, you're married to a sociopath.
Exactly.
Or even a psychopath, which you couldn't have known at the time. And many people are avoiding premarital counseling, jumping from one church to another and saying, oh, I know Pastor so-and-so, he's going to do the wedding for me. And Pastor so-and-so is not careful to ask you the questions. I have a thing, there's 12 questions that you must ask. Every Christian must ask before they intend to get married. And some of those are piercing questions. Does he have debt?
Okay.
So there you are, and it looks all nice until you discover he's got 4 million shillings in the hole. And the reason he keeps moving, keeps leaving the country is because guys are looking for him. So some of these questions we have to start asking. So how do we relate to it? What is a real relationship? What's the value of real relationship? So this is where the conversation starts. So this hooking up culture and things, when we start with a wrong basis, we're building a wrong foundation, and the building is already leaning by the time it starts. You say, I mean, that's the leaning tower of Susan or whatever it is.
So now we realize, either with our careers or we realize with our relationships, that we need to start over.
Right.
If you're to give us just like some quick highlights of how do we go about doing that?
Okay. I lost my job at some point. I was working for an international organization with involvement in 22 countries. I travel. Sounds glamorous. And then one day the area manager for Africa, Middle East, Asia comes and says, I'm sorry, we're out of funding. You got to go.
Okay.
What do? I had to start over. So leaning on, like again I said, okay, so what are the foundations? Going to my mentors and saying, this is my situation. You've been in a situation before, and this is the thing about having people who've been there before and can talk you into this. So somebody to coach you. So that's one of the critical things. But recognizing that the old has gone and there's a new situation. Okay, it's important to call the insurance guys so that they will know not to expect a check next month. Okay, so maybe I have to move. Maybe I have to look for a new job. So
change lifestyle.
Change of lifestyle. I think this is very important, and it works both ways. So suddenly you have no money and you have to start over again. I say, I'm going to have to look. So I have a friend who was working for a leading hotel, and then for some reason or other, the entire staff, out of some vindictive thing, got fired, and he was out on the street. I remember meeting him on the street, and it's a thing to see a grown man older than you cry and say, help me, Pete. And I couldn't help him. Couldn't help him. But then I met him later, and his life had changed, and he's in the hotel industry. What I'm saying is that sometimes it's really just an understanding hand. So having to understand that I must make changes. I must make changes. I must make financial commitments that I can meet. And then part of that is doing the hard work. Understanding this, I think this is another important. Nothing is permanent, Mona.
Nothing is permanent.
Nothing is permanent. Understanding this will help you deal with even the loss of a loved one. So the relationship ended because my late father passed on, and I've had to come to terms with not being able to trying to reach for my phone and then saying, "Oh man, he's not there anymore. He's not there anymore. What do I do?" Learning that this is part of life, and we are super superstitious about death. Bringing that conversation to people. We have all these euphemisms to say that somebody has died. He passed on, was promoted to glory, he gone yonder. All these things, and to kind of soften the blow. And I get it. But understanding the pragmatism of life, and that life doesn't, these are cycles that everybody goes through. So I think that is some of the conversation that we must have. But the flip side is also important. So suddenly you are the village girl, and the next thing you know, you're at this you're the head of this NGO, and you don't know which fork is which. Learn. Importance is learning.
And being honest. Because until you're honest, you can't learn.
Right. So I do a mentorship program that will actually teach people. So one guy comes to me and says, the day of the lesson, it seemed like, oh, man, okay, so there's 3 forks, there's 3 knives, there's 2 spoons. This is a champagne flute. This is what these different glasses are. This is what you need to know. It's not just a glass. This is a flute. This is a tumbler. This is a glass.
White wine.
Right.
Red wine.
Yes. Okay. So that's what this is. Okay. Right. Got it. They didn't know, and a few months later, they were thrust into an international space where they had to know, and they were there. Everybody was looking. What do we do? And he knew what to do. And he came back to me and says, Pastor Pete, what you taught me.
It worked.
And so learning about etiquette, there's people now who have mentored from when they were 15. Now they have their masters and whatever program, and they're dealing with heads of state and so on. How do you move from just that little girl from around the corner to my signature is important in 5 countries, and the fate of 5 countries
depend on you.
And that's the stuff that we have to learn. That's the importance of mentorship. So I can't overemphasize how important mentors are. But being willing, here's the other thing is, change is a force. It's something that I call the force of change. And you can't fight the force of change. Because if you're on the receiving end of the force of change, then what tends to Kenya's become moving from a colony to an independent country. And the force of change was blowing across Africa, starting with Ghana and moving. You can't fight it. Sooner or later, it's going to arrive at your doorstep, so you must prepare.
Prepare for it.
So the biggest thing that will help you with change is preparing. And the best way to prepare is to understand that nothing is really permanent. The people you love at some point will either leave or pass away. So you need to understand that if nothing's permanent, then how do I prepare? Creating also buffers, emotional buffers, financial buffers. Your people who are dealing with now, we have radio stations and media houses that were giants just 10 years ago, having to fight with some guy in his room who's broadcasting literally from Kwakeja. And you say, what is going on? What is going? And that's your competition. Banks never thought that they'd be dealing with cell phone service providers for their customers. These are changes that we must embrace. The digital age is not coming. It's with us. It is with us. And so we have to learn to embrace and learn. Okay, so I don't know something, and I'm going to have to learn from a younger person. Because we'd laugh at our parents because they couldn't deal with email addresses. That's us now. That I have to learn from my daughters. Teach me this, and I'm willing to sit with she and her friends and say, okay, let me be uncool for a moment. Let me be cool for a moment, because I've got to learn and listen to their language, not so that I can just be cool, but so that I can understand and be relevant. There are jobs that people are doing now that within 10 years are going to be completely irrelevant and obsolete. And if I'm not willing to deal with this, there's debates going on right now in the United States Senate. And the people who are making those decisions don't know how to use the internet. How can you make a decision about something you don't know how to use? And these are the same questions. We're in flux. The world is in flux. And so we must be, and I think this is another thing, is be honest. I don't know. And the day you say, I don't know, you're ready to learn.
That's true. Wow. Okay, I feel like we've not even started talking about this, and we're out of time.
We're out of time.
We're out of time,
So thank you for being on my show. I really appreciate this.
Thank you, Pete, for having me on your show. I completely appreciate it. So if I can just wrap it up, I'm just going to try and wrap up a lot of what... So if I'm just going to try and quickly sum it up, actually, Pete, what we've said is, number one, we have to... Pain and conflict is the indicator that...
Change is necessary.
Change is necessary. And once you realize that change is necessary, we have to accept and be honest that this change needs to take place. And as soon as we do that, then we need to start preparing ourselves.
Arm ourselves for change.
Arm ourselves for change, which is inevitable. And you said you cannot stop the force of change. So we have to be clear that this thing is going to happen and change that.
Absolutely.
And be ready for that.
Be ready for change,
Okay.
Sometimes change happens and nobody could have anticipated. Nobody could have anticipated some of the things that we've seen with global terrorism and so on. But you can learn and pick up, because there's always indicated, okay, so I'm going to have to learn to adjust. We learn to adjust to security checks even at the least significant supermarket. Wave a wand on you. So adjusting is important.
Adjusting.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you so much. Again, I feel like there's still so much more.
Thank you, Mona, for having me.
Unwrap.
Right.
And thank you guys for being here, for watching on Starting Over, which is so crucial because this happens to us all the time when we expect it and we don't expect it. And like the recap I've just done with Pete right now, we just need to be prepared to accept that this thing is going to happen, change happens, to be prepared for it, to fortify ourselves, and then to move forward from that point on. So as we wrap up the season, as we come into the next season, we know things are going to change, things are going to be different. We will prepare ourselves for it, we will fortify for it, and we'll get into the next best version of us that we can be as people, as a production, as Life with Mona. So thank you guys so much for being here. We do hope that we have inspired you. We hope that we have impacted you. And we hope that in turn, you've done that for other people. Thank you for being with us. We could not have done this without you. Be safe, be kind to yourself, be happy, be love. Mwah. This is Life with Mona.